The Mark Carney Liberals have unveiled their federal budget with a $78 billion deficit, one of the largest in Canadian history. Now, that alone is scandalous. But what if I told you that there's an even bigger Liberal scandal involving our finances, one that's worse than Trudeau's Aga Khan trip, the SNC-Lavalin affair, the wheat charity fiasco, and Mark Carney's many conflicts of interest. A scandal involving hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars being wasted, with hundreds of billions more set to be wasted by the end of the decade. Hi, I'm Elie, and I've been implicated in Canadian politics for almost 10 years now, and I've covered it for the past 5 years as a political journalist working for Canada's top independent media outlets. And I've been digging through Carney's latest budget, as well as previous Liberal budgets and other fiscal updates. And in doing that, I found something shocking. Because it's not just that the Liberals are driving Canada into deeper debt with reckless spending, it's that this debt comes with hundreds of billions of dollars in interest costs, so costs just to service that debt, which means that billions come out of our paychecks and go directly to Bay Street bond fund managers, who are getting rich while the Liberals are spending into oblivion. In this episode of Simply Politics, we'll break down this outrageous Liberal scandal with the help of Franco Terrazzano, the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. But before we get into that, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Journalism and commentary 1 year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
You have to rebuild the foundation. You have to retell the stories. Other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. I think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged with.
Part 1. The Liberals' National Debt. Mark Carney is spending big in his budget. In total, he will spend $580 billion and run an unprecedented $78 billion deficit. He's also planning to add hundreds of billions of dollars more in deficits throughout the rest of the decade. Carney will spend more than what Trudeau had planned to spend. Trudeau, I will remind you, was the biggest spender in Canadian history. And Canada's national debt, which is currently around $1.2 trillion, with half of that debt having been added by Trudeau alone, will reach new record highs. So how did we get here? Well, back in 2015, the Conservatives under Stephen Harper balanced the budget. But then Justin Trudeau came around with promises of deficits and an eventual return to a balanced budget. He said his deficits would not exceed $10 billion.
He says a modest deficit, a tiny deficit, so small you can hardly see the deficit.
Trudeau also said that budgets balance themselves.
How committed to a balanced budget would you be right now? Would it worry you to go into deficit in this current climate to, as you say, put more people to work?
The commitment needs to be a commitment to grow the economy, and the budget will balance itself.
But it turns out that budgets do not balance themselves, and Justin quickly missed his targets and broke his promise, one of many that he broke during his time as Prime Minister. Trudeau's budget 2016 marked a return to deficits, with even more deficits in 2017, 2018, 2019, and more. And then came the pandemic, which gave Trudeau another excuse to spend even more money. The Trudeau Liberals had a $328 billion deficit in 2020, and another outrageously high deficit in 2021. From 2018 to 2023, the Liberals recorded the highest years of spending per person in Canadian history, more spending than during the Great Depression, both World Wars, and the 2008 financial crisis. It took 150 years and 22 prime ministers to rack up $616 billion of debt, the amount of debt Canada had when Trudeau took office. But Trudeau racked up that same amount in less than a decade. He literally doubled Canada's debt. And today, under his successor, Mark Carney, each Canadian owes $30,000 as their share of the national debt. And yet, this isn't even the worst part of all of this, nor is it the scandal that I'm making this video about. Part 2, the big scandal. The real scandal is the interest payments that we, the taxpayers, are being made to pay just to service the Liberals' debt. So this is not to pay it down, this is just to maintain it. Borrowing isn't free, and just like individuals, when government borrows, it has to pay interest. Here's how Franco Terrazzano puts it.
The best way to think about it is look at your own credit card bill, right? Not only are you trying to pay down the amount of debt, but every cycle, every billing, you also have to pay interest charges on your own credit card bill. And it's very similar the way it works out with the federal government.
In the 2024-2025 fiscal year, the Liberals spent $53.4 billion of taxpayer money on federal debt interest. Again, this is not on paying off debt, this is just on the interest to maintain it. That's more than the Canada Health Transfer, which is the money that the federal government sends to provinces for healthcare, which was $52.1 billion, and more than the child care benefits, which were $35.1 billion. It's also comparable to what the federal government collects in sales tax. And who gets this money? Well, it's bond fund managers on Bay Street.
Well, what's $1 billion? That's a brand new hospital every single week that is not getting built because that money's going to the bond fund managers on Bay Street to pay interest charges on the government debt.
But wait, it gets worse, because $53.4 billion is just for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. The government has to spend an absurd amount of money servicing the debt every year. And since 2015, the year that Trudeau took office, the government has spent almost $300 billion on debt servicing costs, on interest. Again, that's $300 billion literally being burned. This is utterly scandalous. And yet, it's not even the most concerning part of all of this. Because as we're about to see, Carney's budget is about to make all of this a lot worse. Part 3, where this is all going. Carney's budget makes this scandal even worse by pushing these interest payments even higher than they already are. Carney's budget estimates that Canadians will spend an additional $330 billion servicing the debt by the end of the decade, including a whopping $76 billion just for the 2029-2030 fiscal year. Add that new $330 billion we're expected as taxpayers to waste on this to the $300 billion that we have already wasted since 2015, the year that Trudeau took office, and that makes for $630 billion being spent on servicing government debt, not even bringing it down the cost, not even paying it down, just servicing it. Basically, the equivalent of half of our current debt will have been spent just servicing it.
The biggest threat to government services is not political ideology, it's interest charges on the debt. You end up at a scenario where it's very difficult for a government to borrow money, but more to the point, you end up with a scenario where more and more dollars aren't going to services, more and more dollars are going to pay interest on the debt. So you're paying more through your federal tax dollars, and you're getting less from federal services.
No matter your politics, this is the reality. A bigger deficit today means higher taxes tomorrow. And Canada is already one of the most taxed countries in the world. I mean, our tax burden is insane. Part 4, the left's case for government debt. Those who support more government spending on the left have built a case for it. Among those who support more government spending, unions like Unifor and CUPE, as well as some Canadian academics. They make several arguments which I discuss with Terrazzano. The first argument made by supporters of more government spending is that Canada's debt to GDP ratio, meaning the amount of debt Canada has in comparison to its GDP, is the lowest in the G7, the G7 being this group of top 7 economies. And therefore, our finances are actually sustainable.
First of all, that's almost like you're bragging about being the most sober person in the drunk tank, right? Like, you probably don't want to brag about that.
Terrazzano also pointed out that this claim is misleading because it relies on something called net debt instead of gross debt. Gross debt is the total amount of all liabilities, meaning obligations to pay owed money, while net debt is this gross debt minus the cash and cash-like assets. And in the case of Canada, our net debt includes the Canada Pension Fund, the CPP, which is an asset that the government has, but an asset of which it cannot use to pay down government debt. When you look at gross debt, Canada is not a good performer. A study amongst 32 industrialized countries found that Canada is in 26th place, 26 out of 32, when it comes to government gross debt. Second, supporters of more government spending will say that a large part of the government debt that Canada currently has was from the pandemic, and it was required to spend a lot of money. In fact, it was the responsible thing to do to help Canadians and save the economy. So they say. And that same argument today is being used in the case of Donald Trump and his tariffs, that these big amounts of spending are required. But according to the Fraser Institute, 40% of the COVID spending by the Trudeau Liberals had nothing to do with the pandemic. And even the spending that did have to do with the pandemic, you had programs like CERB that were full of fraud and abuse. And today, Carney's new budget has a lot of money that have nothing to do with Donald Trump, including new money for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
Look, you ask any family, you ask any business, when an unexpected expense happens, right, you deal with that, right? But then you don't just keep spending more money on everything forever, right? If you have to fix a leaky roof, you fix the roof. You don't then go out and put on a credit card a brand new BMW and a couple flat screen TVs. No, you got to prioritize spending. But that's not what happened at the federal level.
Even before the pandemic, Canada was already spending at very high levels. And in 2020, before COVID, Trudeau was already set to have a massive deficit. The pandemic simply gave him an excuse to spend even more. Another claim is that it's okay to get into debt if it's for investments. This is what Carney is trying to say, and this is what they were saying during the pandemic. This actually builds strength. Meanwhile, austerity, which is when governments reduce spending, they control spending, well, that apparently does more harm than good. Those who use this argument will cite studies like this one by the International Monetary Fund that showed that countries that took part in stimulus spending after the 2008 financial crisis recovered faster than those that slashed their budgets. I asked Terrazzano what he thought of this.
I think when anyone tells you that something's going to pay for itself over time, you've got to be asking, like, what type of magical beans you're trying to sell me, right? Like, you just have to think it through. Like, none of this is paying for itself over time. It reminds me of the claim that the budget will balance itself. And, last I checked, still hasn't done that. And we're, 10 years plus since that claim was made? So no, I mean, if it sounds too good to be true, then it is too good to be true, right? There's no such thing as 5-minute abs, but that's essentially what they're trying to sell you.
Furthermore, some will note that the hundreds of billions of dollars that we spent since 2015 is not just serving the debt of Justin Trudeau, but also of other prime ministers, which is an understandable point. However, given that Trudeau is responsible for half of the debt, and that much of the other half came from other Liberal prime ministers, I think we are 100% justified in calling the hundreds of billions of dollars wasted on debt interest a Liberal scandal. Part 5, how we end this. Since 2015, $300 billion have been wasted on paying the interest on Canada's debt, and another $330 billion is expected to be wasted by the end of the decade. This is a scandal, but we can work towards stopping it and reversing course. To stop it, we'll need real action and not just talk to greatly reduce our national debt.
We've had our federal government be in a very bad spot before, and they were able to climb their way out of the hole but it takes really tough decisions and it takes the political spine to do it. But it's been done before, it could be done again.
Take a look at Argentina. Their current leader, Javier Milei, inherited a country that was deep in debt, running deficit, and having crazy high inflation at over 200%. From day one, he cut spending, he cut the number of government ministries in half, he froze subsidies, and deregulated key sectors. The result? Argentina ran a surplus and inflation went down. Here in Canada, former Alberta Premier Ralph Klein inherited a province in the 1990s that was in debt. And within a decade, he cut spending, he privatized assets, and he used surpluses acquired in part thanks to oil and gas to pay off the debt, making Alberta debt-free in 2004.
The goal is always to be as close as possible to a debt-free Canada. And it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about interest charges, right? The more debt that you carry, the more money that is wasted on interest charges. Like, let me just put it into perspective, where the government is wasting more money paying interest on the debt than what it sends to the provinces in healthcare transfers, where every single dollar that you paid in federal sales tax last year went to pay interest charges on the debt. So let that sink in for a second and think about what we could achieve if we didn't have this debt, right? You could essentially double healthcare transfers or completely eliminate the GST. So a scenario closer to that is the best. But I do think first things first, you got to balance the budget. You got to stop borrowing money. And it looks like Carney's going in the reverse, where we're going to see even like massive deficits from Carney.
My friends, it is time that this issue be taken seriously, because Canada's debt and the massive interest payments that come with it, which is literally money being burned, threatens our future. It drains our paychecks and it enriches the elite while working Canadians suffer. It is time to stop the waste, fix the budget, and get Canada back on track. This video was made possible thanks to viewers like you. I do not take a dime in government subsidies, unlike much of the legacy media. If you enjoyed what you saw, in addition to subscribing and sharing this video, please consider making a one-time contribution or becoming a premium Substack subscriber. Until next time, God bless.